Hey, welcome back to the channel. I am going to be talking about today the 5 things that people make a mistake with when installing their own CPU, motherboard, RAM, and I've had more people contact me on the channel, or people bring their PCs after they've installed them. So let's go through all those things so that when you build your own PC, you won't have the same issues that they had. One of the first things that you're going to be doing in installing the motherboard is to install a cooling fan heat cooling system onto the CPU. And this is where a lot of people make a mistake, and probably I've seen more people complaining about the machine is slow after they built it and can't figure out why, and this is going to be the top reason why. The first thing is, whether you're installing a new cooling fan heatsink assembly onto your CPU, or whether you're putting a new one onto a new PC, the same procedures have to be done. First thing is, you want to make sure that the surface of your CPU has been cleaned. Rubbing alcohol is great. You can rub it and clean both sides of your cooling fan and the CPU, making sure that the surface is perfectly clean. The next thing, of course, once you've prepared the surface and got everything installed, one of the things you want to do is make sure you use the best grease. Now, a lot of people think that the more grease you put on, the better cooling it is going to have, and that is so far from the truth. It's ridiculous. In fact, the more grease you put on, the less cooling effective it's going to be. I've had more people who brought their PCs into me, and we took it off, and it's like they put the whole tube in there. It doesn't work that way. So the next thing, of course, is to use a great one. And when you're looking at your cooling gels or cooling compounds, look for the one that has contained silver in it. Silver is your best conductor and will give you the greatest cooling of all them, above all. Now, the next important thing is not to put too much. Now, there are a lot of people who say, well, I like the 1-dot system, the 2-dot system, the 5-dot, I go like this, and here's the bottom line. Making sure that you don't put too much. You want to get about 1 across the entire surface evenly. And some people put it on the CPU. I personally like to put it on the heatsink assembly myself. And the reason is, if it goes over the edges and such like that, I don't have to worry about it going over the edges of the CPU or anything. Because that is where your greatest problem can occur. Now, once you put on just grease on top of the CPU, whether you use the 5-dot or 3-dot or make an S or whatever way you do it, I'll show you what the result. So this is an example of 2 milliliter works best on a 3.3 CPU. The bottom line is, you want to just put a gentle coating over the edge. The whole point of this procedure is that when the heatsink assembly is mounted on top of the CPU, it's meant to fill out the small little gaps between the CPU and the cooler. It is not meant to conduct the heat like a lot of people think. You just want a little bit in there, just enough to conduct the heat to the CPU cooler. And as you can see here, when you put too much, your cooling effect gets reduced. And of course, once the CPU begins to overheat, your performance drops, gaming drops. So you're getting the idea of what we have to do. Let's just look at the next thing you're going to need to do on a motherboard. Now, before you were going to put it back in the case, you want to obviously attach the heatsink and everything else. So for those of you who aren't very familiar with PC upgrade or a PC installation, the first thing you'll do, of course, you want to get some static connection. You can't see it. I do have a static cord connected to me. Then you're going to get the right heatsink assembly. And you'll notice that the plate that goes underneath your unit, as you can see right here, is keyed. You can't go any other way. Again, like I said, I do have a static protection on here. Okay, now here's our CPU, and it's already been installed. and you notice that this happens to be a B460M Pro, and we're going to be upgrading from an i5 version 3 all the way up to a 10. This is a basic computer that's in my garage that I use for some shooting and videotaping. Now, a lot of the biggest questions I have when installing a PC or doing anything like that is the heatsink material. A lot of people believe that if you put a lot of heatsink material on here and spread it out, make gook, it's going to make good transfer, and that is the farthest from the truth. The thing of it is, you want to put the smallest layer of heatsink material, preferably using silver. But I happen to purchase a heatsink, and as you can see over here, it already has the heatsink material already on it. Case, fan, wherever they are, you want them to be exactly closest to, because once you put this on, you don't want to have to be taking it off again. You know, to suddenly find out that the connector that you're going to be using is not going to fit. Now, once you put the bottom on and you've identified where actually you're going to be plugging it into, I like to put my heat sinks on before I mount the board in the PC. I find it just easier, all in all, to do that. It is just easier to tighten down. It is easier to do all the things. I'm using a Thermalake heatsink assembly, one of the better ones, and it's rated. Make sure when you buy your heatsink, make sure it matches. Make sure it matches the CPU that you're going to be using. You'll see 1150, 1170, 1270, 1250. You want to match the number of the heatsink assembly. Now, there are more robust heatsinks that you can buy, but in this particular situation, I'm not going to need all that extra heatsink material, because we're not going to be doing any heavy gaming. Now, as you mount, once you've got this properly identified and placed it over the holes, and place your wire closest to the CPU connector, you're going to begin tightening, but don't tighten one at one time. So I'm going to do one side, the other side, and you want to do this on a continuous spacing, a little bit at a time, going back and forth. Otherwise, what can happen is the heatsink might not seat properly against the CPU. So you're going to work your way across. And as I can see, this is making good contact with the heatsink. I can see no spaces, I can see no room. I like to use walk tools. That's my particular go-to, because this one over here, this particular one, I can have multiple bits in it. So when I'm doing my PC work, I can switch from small bit to large bit to all kinds of bits. And that's just me personally. Then one of the things I like to do before I even mount this in the PC, I usually try to put my RAM in ahead of time also. Just makes it easier. Now, whether you're going to be using a hard drive or you're going to be using a solid state drive here, on this particular drive, you need to decide what you're going to be using. You have to find out for yourself. Then I like to identify all of the ports. And for me personally, I like to take pictures of the ports close up. So when I'm going in to connect my power switch, my reset switch, all of these switches, I can see right away where everything is. And so that when I'm not trying to look into the case going, where is everything? I can't find it. I can't find it. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, this has been a quick setup for the motherboard. Basically, again, you're going to prepare the CPU once you've installed it. If you're reinstalling a new heatsink cooling assembly, you want to clean the CPU with alcohol. Make sure you use a static band. something that's going to discharge the static from you, prevents you from actually giving this motherboard, CPU, or any of these items with a static charge. Static damages computer components like nothing else. Now, if I haven't asked already, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And if you have a grandpa like myself, and he's still alive, go give him a hug. But you can give us a hug by, number one, putting it in your comments. Was this helpful for you? We were able to gather information maybe you didn't get before. Give us a like, give us a share, and subscribe to the channel. And you can become a channel member, you can give us a thank you, or you can buy us a cup of coffee. That's how we support the channel. Now, I'll leave you the links to to buying some silver grease and the Walks tools and a static band when you're installing this. Like I said, this is part one of a series in which I'm going to be, I showed you how to set up the motherboard, take pictures of all the connectors so that you can get in there and easily identify as you're putting the plugs in there, because there's nothing worse when you're reaching down and you're looking into the PC and you're like, what does that say? What does that say? But if you have a picture, it's much easier to go off that while you're doing all your connections. Again, I hope this information has been helpful. Leave it in the comments. Don't forget to give us a like, and don't forget to give Grandpa a hug. Have a great day, and I'll be back with more videos. This is part one of a series, to look for part two. Thanks so much, and God bless.